Hi guys. This is the AMA lumbar range of motion form that Dr. Senti over at CCOM is using and would like us to fill out for his patients. I am no way an expert at this, nor do I fully understand this, so there could be questions along the way. And if we have further questions, we can contact his PT down in Colorado Springs. Again, her name was Amanda. But from my understanding, to help you best fill this out, this form is also, I'll show you this form and I'll also show you, there's a cervical spine one, which you can kind of read through and follow the same kind of process. But basically, it's a little tricky. You need 2 inclinometers at your clinic in order to do this. So make sure you first have that. And when we look at, let's just take a look at lumbar flexion first. You can see it's asking for a T12 range of motion, a sacral range of motion, and then we'll get to the rest of the stuff in just a moment. But if we take a look here, this best way to describe it is that you put one inclinometer at T12, the other one in S1. You zero out the inclinometers, and then you ask the patient to maximally flex as far as they can. And you're going to take a value at T12 and a value at S1, and you're going to write those down. And let's say we did 2 tests. Now what's important to know is that you have to do 3, so I just didn't do a 3rd column there. And you want to do 3 tests for lumbar flexion, lumbar extension, and then 3 straight leg raises, and 3 tests of lateral flexion left and lateral flexion right. So you record all your numbers, and then you have to determine whether or not the tests are valid. So what I would just say is the first 3 that you do, you take a look at your, in order to determine whether they're valid, you're going to look at the sacral flexion number and the sacral extension number. So these values here, and compare it to your straight leg raise. So if we look at those first numbers, let me see if I wrote this down. And I put this here. You take your section first test of the sacral flexion, which we got for 25 degrees. That was our sacral value in the lumbar flexion. And then we take our sacral extension number in our first test for sacral extension, and that was 10 degrees. So first test 25, first test for flexion was 25, first test for sacral extension was 10. And then we take those same values for the second test, so 65 and 10. And our straight leg raise test, which was 70 degrees, we take the tightest of the test. So one side was 70 and one was 80. So we're going to take the tightest one of those. And then, sorry, I didn't fill this in. Let's say this was 75 and this was 80 again. So for the second test, we're going to take the 75, the tightest of those 2. And so what we do next is, in the first test, to determine whether or not it's valid or not, you're going to take your sacral flexion, which was 25 degrees, and you're going to add it to the sacral extension, which is 10 degrees. So that gives you a total of 35. Now the active straight leg raise measured 70 degrees. So that's a 35 degree difference from 35 to 70, which is more than the 10 degree difference that's allowed. So the first test is deemed not valid. If we look at the second test, the sacral flexion angle was 65 and the extension angle was 10 degrees at the sacrum, which is 75. And the active straight leg raise, the tightest one in the second test, was 75. Therefore, they're equal, and that would make a valid test. And so you want to make sure out of your 3 repetitions, you get a valid test. If there's no valid test in those 3, you repeat the next 3 columns. If those are valid, that's great. You can use that data and send it to Dr. Senti, send him this form. If it is not valid, then you have to reschedule them and retest this process again a next business day or the next appointment. You can get them in the next day or two. And then you would document all that and send it over to Dr. Senti. Now, in this form, you also have what's called a true lumbar flexion angle. And in order to get that, you're going to take your first test of 45 degrees and you're going to minus the sacral, sorry for the shakiness, you're going to minus T12 minus S1's values, and so that ends up being 20 degrees. And then you're going to do that again for each test. That should conclude what you do for lumbar flexion and the lumbar extension, and then your straight leg raises. Going down to your lateral flexion for left and right side bending, you're going to fill it out the same. You're going to start them and look at their left and right values for T12 and lumbar sacral, and then you're going to get the lumbar right lateral flexion angle by subtracting T12 or S1 from T12, and you're going to get that number. Now, what's different is the lateral flexion, you do not need to compare it to the straight leg raise to decide if it's valid or not. Instead, what it says is repeat the procedure 3 times. Only the left and right lateral flexion angle needs to be consistently measured within plus or minus 10% or 5 degrees, whichever is greater. The final measurement for impairment evaluation is the greatest angle measured. And so you just need to make sure that those values are within 5 degrees of each other to call it valid. If not, again, you would take another set of 3. And then you would just document them. The percent impairment, you do not need to comment on that. And then the lumbar ankyliosis and lateral flexion, you do not need to fill out that section as well. So hopefully this helps a little bit. And I have these forms on my desk, so I can send blank ones to you guys with the instructions. If this video is not helpful. All right, I think that's it. Thanks so much.